President Biden maintaining a breakneck pace of signing executive orders and actions in his first 10 days in office. But his first full week in office showed some early signs of cracks in the administration's armor, both foreign and domestic. White House correspondent Kevin Corke is tracking it all for us tonight. Good evening, Kevin.
Evening, Shannon. Quite a first week for the new Biden administration. Much of it, as you know, spent using executive orders to undo the previous administration's policies and ticking off just a few of those campaign promises in the process. But some policies actually proved to be much more controversial than others. One after another, a veritable blizzard of executive orders and directives for the new administration. Combined, 40 in all. But whether it's halting drilling on federal lands, stopping the Keystone XL pipeline, or ending construction on the border wall, critics charge the one thing this administration has done plenty of in 10 days is kill jobs. A Save the Planet posture spearheaded by a man whose family's private jet over the past year has emitted as much carbon as around 36 typical passenger cars would. Critics also blasted the 78-year-old president who insisted on the campaign trail that he'd have a plan to tackle the virus on day one for not actually having one. Witness this admission after just a few days on the job.
There's nothing we can do to change the trajectory of the pandemic in the next several months.
Mr. Biden later tried to clear up that gaffe, but trying to be extra careful to avoid gaffes at the White House press shop, well, that's taken on a whole new meaning.
I don't have anything new for you on that, and we'll circle back with you directly. I can circle back. I'll circle back with you.
Now, whether that's a tick, a lack of preparedness, or an intentional lack of specificity, which would later have to be defended, the lack of clear answers are growing frustration for many, as are the administration's increasingly curious diplomatic decisions, from suspending the sale of military goods to U.S. Mideast partners, to the administration's relatively muted response to recent provocations by Beijing toward Taiwan, to its ban on travel to the U.S. from the UK, Ireland, and 26 other Eurozone countries, as well as Brazil and South Africa over COVID concerns. And speaking of COVID, blame shifting for failures with distribution and availability has begun to wear thin on many, including those on the left, especially with tens of millions of Americans out of work, countless businesses on the brink, and a $1.9 trillion relief plan that's anything but a sure bet. Yeah, that is absolutely right. Now, backers would certainly push back, and they would argue, Shannon, that the new White House was being aggressive in the use of those executive orders because it wanted to gain momentum where it could, while longer, harder fights over things like the stimulus played out over on Capitol Hill. However, as the New York Times writes in an op-ed, quote, these directives, however, are a flawed substitute for legislation. They are intended to provide guidance to government, not meant to serve as an end run around the will of Congress, which means we should expect probably fewer EOs, if you believe the Times, in the months ahead. Janet?
Well, every president knows they're only as good as until the next president shows up and whether they agree on these things. Easily done and easily undone.
That's right.
Kevin, thank you.
You bet.
The FBI